Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the LinkedIn Live today. I am going to give everyone maybe a minute or so to kind of join on. So, as you join on, just please say hi to me in the chat before we kind of get into the main thing. Thank you for joining us and excited to kind of jump into the conversation as well. Okay, trying to see if people are joining us in the chat. Please say hi if you missed that kind of introduction. We love to see who's joining us. And you can even use that chat feature as we start asking questions and we get into the conversation with Justin. I'm going to give us about like 30 more seconds and then we can kind of hop into it. Hi, Judy. Hi, Catherine. Okay, I'm seeing names kind of pop in. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to get this jumping. Thank you again for joining us for the LinkedIn Live for promo for our upcoming PubForum Scottsdale conference. Today with us, we have Justin Wall, who is CRO of Snopes, joining us, kind of to give him a preview into what we're going to talk about. Today, we're going to be talking about future ops in the ad tech stack. Thank you, Justin, for joining us.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for having me. Hey, everybody.
Of course, of course. And before we kind of jump into the Q&A, for all these LinkedIn Lives, I love to do like an icebreaker just so the audience can get to know the speaker a little bit more. And just, Justin, just so we can start off, I know you've had an amazing career in ad tech, and right now you're working at Snopes. And I know you have a lot of time to reflect about it, but I kind of want to look toward the future. And just to kind of start off, if you could acquire one new skill to future-proof your career, what would that be?
Oh man, there's always been this line in the sand between, ad ops and dev, or those are my developers and they're over there. But um, as far as future proofing goes, I was really grateful to get the chance to take CS 101 from Stanford, and they offered it online for free over the pandemic. This is like early when we were all home.
Mhm.
But it was like the very basics of writing and reading code. It really went into Python specifically, and I think that learning that like very foundational level of understanding just kind of upskilled me for working with our development team, for reading docs, for better communicating with our vendors what we need. So like thinking to the future, kind of rounding out skill set, I would recommend that for anybody. And I mean, there's boot camps and like one-off courses that could be taken, but being able to be literate in code a little bit and not just have that be something you like kick over to the other side of the office was huge.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Especially for people who work in data, I could see that being a very useful skill. It's something I work on at a base level, so it's probably something I could be even learn from taking. So that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, and even one more icebreaker before we kind of jump into the Q&A,
sure. Yeah.
looking toward the future as well as ad tech as a whole, what aspect of ad tech do you think will be different or completely obsolete over the next decade?
Third party cookies. No. It's funny.
At
It's,
least
we
we
could have
thought.
used that answer. We could use that answer over and over again. Oh man. No, I think for the decade you said.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh
that
man.
was kind of the time frame I was thinking, if it's 5 years into the future or whenever.
Yeah, no, I do think on a future timeline, we're seeing devices and browsers and operating systems all move like in a more privacy focused direction. So
Mhm.
the way that we have tracking and measurement working today on the internet will change. Privacy Sandbox was just like a really good glimpse into where this technology could go. It's definitely not the final state of that, but it does show how we go away from the tracking and measurement that we're familiar with today and move more into these like confined environments that are purpose built to be privacy forward while also communicating, what data needs to be and that they have to improve, right? Privacy Sandbox was not a success. It wasn't as good as it needed to be out of the box, but we're talking 5 to 10 years. Yeah, definitely. Like a big shift towards new closed loops of data and new means of transaction. I think we also see a lot of things move server side and be like behind the scenes, not so client side and in network requests when it comes to web.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of talked about privacy because I think that's a great segue into the Q&A and to the audience before I kind of start. If you have any questions as we talk, I'll try to be looking in the chat just to see if we can add any of your perspective into that as well. But just to kind of hop into the first question, you did kind of talk about how privacy is kind of shifting how digital media is and how the internet is and how ad ops will work. So just thinking about your time in ad ops and ad tech as a whole, how have you seen the industry evolve from when you started to where you are now, especially thinking about privacy, where you were talking about, and even publishers struggling to gain revenue as digital media changed? What kind of things and patterns are you seeing?
I think the experience of always being on the supply side, always being on the publisher side of this business, has been one of catching up to the buy side. I know that there's different perspectives on how sophisticated our buyers really are, but whether they're more sophisticated than the supply side or not doesn't matter as much as being on the same page with them and playing catch up. So over over time, I would say that more than 10 years in the industry, on the supply side, we've become smarter. We've become more sophisticated, more aware of our value proposition. And I think that as kind of tech understanding comes to parity on both the buy and sell side, that we should keep seeing this evolution of more sophistication, more self-determination on the supply side, where we know the value of our inventory and can sell it successfully. I still see tech opportunities for publishers in this space, and that's like resource constrained, that's budget constrained, but we're talking about like a long-term evolution of things. I see the supply side becoming more and more empowered as we keep going.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And especially thinking about the buy side and the sell side kind of coming together. And as the supply side gets more sophisticated, is definitely an interesting point to kind of jump off there. But I kind of want to dig more into the weeds, especially into the ad tech stack as we're preparing for your session at Pub Forum as well. Just to look into the future, how do you think the tech stack has evolved, especially in response to like AI advancement as programmatic has got more advanced and stuff like that?
Man, it's hard to think about this question without looking at the day by day breakdown of what's happening in the DOJ Google case right now,
Mhm.
because the evolution of the tech stack that we are all familiar with, that we all operate on a daily basis, like pre-bid and header bidding, was so heavily influenced by the decisions of Google and how they were going to interact with that tech stack. So that what we have, what we've inherited, or what we've been operating for years now, is really a result of extreme pressures put on that ad tech space by like what you could get out of DFP, of GAM, and like how you could access ad exchange. That is so significant in shaping like what we have on hand today. We'll see what happens with the case, right? Like this is still playing out. I'm thinking of little call notes that I'm getting every day from it.
Mhm.
But if it goes a certain way, it could really mean a big shakeup with how much more efficient publishers can be, where things could move to more pure programmatic, more pure header bidding without this like strange bias that happens when you try to get at AdX demand through GAM. I think that should that unlock for us, it'll create a lot of movement, a lot of opportunity for publishers to like better optimize and become more efficient with how we run our auctions and sell our inventory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm glad you kind of brought in the case because we're still kind of up in the air to see how that's going to fall into place. So maybe you can't really speak to it now because the decision might change it. But especially as like publishers think about like future proofing their tech stack, like what kind of things would you advise them to do? Like how would you kind of accommodate these changes?
Man, I think that being super dialed in with every single one of your programmatic partners is kind of the challenge for publishers today. I keep going back to this idea of what we've inherited. And I suppose since this is a teaser, our inheritances will be what I talk about on stage at Scottsdale. But, there are a lot of programmatic partners in all of our stacks that take more than they give as far as publishers are concerned. When we send bid requests out to all kinds of people, we're transmitting lots and lots of data about our audience, about our traffic, about our supply. And in many cases, the bid responses pale in comparison to how much data we've actually given away in our requests. So as we keep evolving, I hope to see more kind of awareness of this relationship dynamic for publishers on the supply side. And help us push a bit more against our partners who aren't necessarily returning value back to us for all that we give up to them.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I kind of want to do a little bit of a pivot, thinking, especially with the future of ops, AI has been a huge thing. Of course, AI has been around for a while, but with the popularity of generative AI, a lot of people are kind of thinking how to integrate those things into their daily operations, especially ad ops, in the way it could be done practically. So, where should publishers start integrating AI into their processes? And can you kind of talk a little bit about how you guys do that at Snopes as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think AI still can echo or rhyme with machine learning, right? Like there's AI, true AI, generative AI, where you've got large language models. That is the next level for publishers to get to. But machine learning opportunities have been here for a while, and I think that what AI and Gen AI represents to the publishing community is kind of like the ability to get at some technology and data processing capabilities that was previously resource restricted to us. Like it was only a large company who had a data science team who could even begin to think about applying this kind of algorithmic understanding of their data to their business. Like otherwise, it was out of reach. But as AI tools become more and more commercially available and publicly available, I do think you're right. Like publishers can start thinking about where this can get worked in. But still today, like if I have a huge data set of like clearing prices by size, by geo, by bidder, and I want to analyze that to come up with either some type of traffic shaping strategy or a dynamic price flooring strategy, it's not really Gen AI that is going to help me to do that. Although that might be the entry point for some today, that's still kind of like a machine learning data science approach that's going to come out with the answers that you're looking for. But Gen AI is also kind of interesting on the creative front. So for publishers, that could mean the messaging that we need to show our users. I don't think that we're quite at the place where we'd let Gen AI come up with all different kinds of prompts for our consent management platforms, but that is kind of where I do see it going, which is using Gen AI to come up with 50, 100 different ways to ask our audiences to sign in, to support us, to consent to tracking and targeted advertisement, to sign up for a newsletter. Like these are all very much requests that publishers need to make to our audiences. And we're kind of limited in how creative and how dynamic we can be with those things. But Gen AI offers a way to think about maybe doing that at a much larger scale and figuring out what messaging variants work best for your brand in a way that, coming up with ideas on your own probably wouldn't have achieved.
Yeah, yeah. And you kind of talked about the creative aspect and a little bit about kind of streamlining some of your processes. Can you talk about any success stories where like AI has dramatically improved like any of your efficiency or like revenue optimization strategies?
I would say that we're not quite there yet. It hasn't dramatically improved anything, but it is definitely something that we're testing to find, single digit percentage gains here and there where we can. I've seen it do that, but I'd also caution that like Gen AI as it exists today is relatively expensive. The cost per query is not insignificant, and depending on how big of a data set or how big um, of a question you're asking, how much processing is going to be required, that query could be really expensive. So I think if it's cool, like we're talking about AI, another aspect of this for the publishing business, especially at Snopes, is that we launched the FactBot here, snopes.com/FactBot. You can interact with it today. It's live, it's free. But that is a chatbot that's built using all of the archive of Snopes content, and we use Anthropic, Claude, and I think we actually upgraded it to Sonnet since then. But you can swap out the large language model that's being used in the background, search all of your content, take a user's question, understand that question, match the stories to it, and then have the chatbot come up with a response and speak right back to the person. So yeah, if you're dialed in right now, for sure, check this out, snopes.com/factbot. But the reality is that the cost of each of those queries is probably close to 5 times as much as I get back from ad value right now. Like it's quite upside down in terms of return. So as much as I'm inviting you all to go check it out, it's also going to lose me money by doing so. But that's just in the short term, right? Like we do think that these processing costs will go down as performance keeps improving from the AI companies. So I don't think this is the long-term condition, but like the cost of testing, the cost of experimenting is real right now. So as it relates to coming up with new creatives for your brand or analyzing the data from your revenues, like know that it's not just a free tool, that there is compute cost involved.
Yeah, I love that. And I
Oh,
love
thanks, Catherine. I
yeah, I was
saved you
about
the
to say, I
link in
love
there.
how Catherine kind of promoted it into the
Yeah,
chat. So please do
thank
check
you.
it out. But I do think you did bring up a good point about the cost, especially as publishers are kind of in a state where they're thinking about how to diversify revenue. Maybe AI isn't necessarily the best option, but I mean, with FactBot, if it can kind of help you learn your audience in that way and use it, there is kind of like an interesting way that you can kind of use it. So that is definitely interesting.
Yeah. One more fun plug about that one. We built it so that if it doesn't know the answer, we really don't want hallucinations. So it's quite clear with you. Sorry, I don't have the answer for that. But when that happens, we build up a log of all the questions that it didn't know the answer to in a given day, and then are able to run large language model analysis of that pool of questions and come up with a summary for our editorial team that says, hey, here are the 3 biggest topics that FactBot didn't know the answer to yesterday. Or here are the questions. Like there's a couple different ways that it'll spit out the results, but essentially it becomes a tip jar or a lead line for the newsroom of what they might go and try to do fact checks about next.
Yeah, yeah, true. I mean, even as someone who does work in editorial, that information is so valuable. So yeah, that definitely makes sense. And just to kind of pivot a little bit, just to get more into the weeds of programmatic and things you might talk about at your session at Pubform Scottsdale, um, thinking about concepts like bid throttling, traffic shaping, and dynamic price flooring, how do you feel that interacting to shape the future of programmatic advertising?
Yeah, I do think that the understanding of what happens in programmatic advertising is the publisher's burden. Like we can otherwise sit back and not know what happens and hope that we get enough value back. But I keep harping on this idea of what we're putting in and the value return that we should expect. So when it comes to price flooring or traffic shaping, when it comes to figuring out what buyers should have the opportunity to look at any given ad space that you have, participate in an auction or not. Like this all comes back to the publisher understanding and predicting the outcome and the value that they're going to get back to like maximize their return on the whole business. So it's not that we've been overly lazy to find ourselves in this point, right? Like I don't think that this is a problem of negligence. I think that we are just day by day, month by month, and news cycle by news cycle, understanding more and more of the landscape that we play in as publishers. And it's our responsibility to respond to that, to react to that, and to change our business accordingly.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And before I kind of dip into my final question for Justin, please just let me know if you have any kind of questions or comments in the audience. Please just put them in the chat and I'll try to answer them as best as we can. But finally, Justin, for me, what practical tips would you recommend to publishers to kind of optimize the ad tech stack for revenue and efficiency?
It's funny, like I think one of the regular conversations that I have with all of our SSP partners, and today, just for context, we run a direct only auction for each of our SSP partners with no reselling allowed, and there's about 20 SSPs that get called for that auction with a direct seat each, and everyone wants to know like where they fall in your stack ranking every quarter. Where did we come in? Were we your third largest buyer? Were we your smallest buyer? And I would say for years I have had that conversation every quarter, and for years nothing really changes after I tell them that they're at the bottom or they're in the middle. So a good place to start off and to come into the pub forum at Scottsdale as a publisher would be to have a solid understanding of each of your partners' contributions to your revenue versus how many requests or opportunities they were provided. And let's really think about why that is. Should that person have been buying more from you? Should you continue to include them in your auction opportunities? I think that's the concept that I want to explore on stage and in session. And that would be the homework to do ahead of time and to come in with, is to be prepared with, I want to optimize my partners and know who sits where so that we can really talk about the business and why that is.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to kind of end it. Just wanted to check, did anyone kind of have any more comments or questions in the chat? Just wanted to check that before we kind of end things off. Let's see. Well, again, thank you guys for joining us. Before we kind of end things off, I do want to say, as we've said before, upcoming, we have our Pubform Scottsdale event on November 10th through 12th. If you have not already registered, we would love to have us. We have until September 27th to kind of get the early bird rate, so you can get a little bit of a discount on that. You saw how amazing Justin was today and how knowledgeable he was on the topic. So him, alongside other amazing speakers, you'll be able to see. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon, and hope to see you guys in Pubform Scottsdale as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Andrew.